Nō kia kua. Nui ko mākou aloha ia oe, a mahalo ka nei, ko mākou mālama kia ia nei mākou. Mau Iesu Kristo la ko mākou ho'ola. Amen.
Amen. Mahalo, mahalo nui, Hailama. You know, Hailama, in collaboration, of course, with you in your role at Kamehameha Schools, also with you in your role as the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs president, along with a few other of our friends, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, the King Kamehameha Celebration Commission, who am I leaving? The Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Yeah, we have come together to, explain more about the fabulous thing that we're planning to do this whole year.
So of course, obviously, we're in the month of March, and yes, we acknowledge that Ka'ahu Manu's, our Queen's birthday, is this month. Of course, recognizing the connection to Kamehameha Ekolu on the same day. And yet, many of us feel a little more connected to Prince Kūhiō for many reasons, whether it's because you are a member of an organization begun by the Prince, or perhaps you live on Aina Ho'opulapula, and if you benefited some other way because of our citizen Prince. But we kind of got together as a family, the organizations you mentioned, and we thought it imperative that we can no longer use the excuse of COVID to prevent us from celebrating the various celebrations that we have, like Kamehameha Day or Kūhiō celebration. And the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs has actually worked years on honoring Kūhiō, as do the ohana of the Aina Ho'opulapula. And we normally have a Prince Kūhiō Day parade. We normally have Ho'ike'ike and other festival parts in the celebration. And this year we thought, well, number one, we're going to extend it, but it's going to be virtual. And that allows for more people to celebrate. And if I'm not mistaken, Mehana, this forum on Facebook can also be replayed and people can watch it later, those who are not able to see this. So this gives folks an opportunity to connect. And yet I said we are a little more intimate perhaps with Kūhiō, our ALIʻI. And yet I fear that maybe we're not as intimate as we should be with this definite ALIʻI and then other ALIʻIs. So we're going to continue this throughout the year, and definitely working with the King Kamehameha Day Celebration Commission to honor Kamehameha Paiʻea come June. And we have events planned already. So this is the first week, and it's live, of the 4-week cycle to honor Kūhiō. And we're working on some other celebrations that are coming out in the month of March. And you'll hear from us if you can stay connected to leali'i.org.
Yes.
And I want to thank you, Mehana, for, I know you're representing the CNHA, Council of Native Hawaiian Advancement, but you are also serving as our Wahine Waha'olelo. And you have the mana of speech and leading us, facilitating us through our various presentations this month. So mahalo to you, Mehana.
You know, mahalo nui, for our squad, our committee of people for allowing me to do this. I'm very honored and so happy. Who would say no? Our first guest is Manu Boyd, you know what I mean? And he always, right, leaves us wanting more. Right, we could listen to him vala'o on the range of topics of pili to our Hawaii, right, our people, our homeland, you know, our culture, all day, you know. So again, I'm privileged to be able to do this. And Hailama, mahalo nui, I didn't get to thank you for, you know, bringing us together with Pule. You know, that was so important. And mahalo Manu for, you know, actually in our vala'o session before this, you know, making it a point to include that, you know, in this. So thank you so much. And hang around Hailama if you can, because I'm sure this is going to be a very engaging presentation. And now I'd like to I guess introduce our honored guest today. Right, he is a kumuhula. He is an award-winning musician. He is a teacher of many, again, many subjects under the Malu of Hawaii. He is also my cousin. I think actually both of you are my cousins somehow. Yeah, if not, I'm going to just claim you guys as my cousins. And he is possibly, one of our greatest storytellers of our time. Yeah, and so I really am, again, honored and thankful that he's here to join us, from Iuka'o Nu'uanu. I think he's at his hale in Nu'uanu, sharing with us all that vai that comes from that space, there, to be inspired. It's a wonder why, you are inspired every time I get to hear you talk. But without further ado, Kumu Manuʻaikohana Boyd. Aloha Manu.
O wau no me ula I ka pua o te ari, pole nale nā hale nā I ka wai I te oho kalu kalu nua o te uki, no puki uki ka makale nā o te tola. Wahine pua kai au o lalo o kiki vai e tanau. I kahi mea I ki huna maka hulu, me he haela I ta piri o e mai. Hui, aloha kumehana kākou.
Aloha.
Mahalo ia oe e kuho hanau o mehana a o oe hoi e hai lama no ke ia kono ana mai ia u e noho a wala au. Ho maka ana ho maka olelo Hawaii ala ila hoi ana I ka mea ka olelo haone I hiki ke ke maopopo ka hapa nui o ke ia po e anaina e lohe mai nei. Ano laila o wau ke ia o Manu Boyd, pu'u inoa piha o Charles Albert Manuʻaikohana Boyd. Ua hanau ia wau ma wai alai kahala, a hanai ia ma wai lupe aina haina, a me ka hale o kupuna wahine ma kapahulu, e ia ke noho nei ma e nu'uanu. A hana wau ma ke kula o Kamehameha. So my name is Manu Boyd. We've learned the loina or the practice of our kupuna to introduce ourselves first. And every time you introduce yourself, you often make connections with other people, and that's just the Hawaiian way. But I was born in Kahala on Oahu, and I used to always sort of shy away from admitting that. But it is what it is, and those lands are also lands of Keli'i Pauahi, raised in Ainahaina, and then also at the house of my grandma, Julia Boyd, and Grandpa also, James Alapuna Boyd Sr. In Kapahulu. And I mentioned that because I think it's, as I think back to my upbringing, and which is going to tie into our discussion today on Kalanianaʻole, is that, my grandma, who lived all the way till I was already in college, but she was born in 1895 in Kohala. So however it happened this way, here we are in 2021, but the relevance of those born in the 19th century are still with us today. And they kind of are reflected in what we're talking about today. So among the things I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about two mele, one of which is called Pualeilani, and the other is Pu'uhome o Keokaha. But I also mentioned to both Hailama and Mehana Okala that I'm also going to present some images in kind of a low-tech fashion. On purpose, I did not do a PowerPoint deck of images and all that because I just think it's more natural. And so the images I show you today, and I have about 40 from the life of Kalanianaʻole, and I'm going to begin with this one in my low-tech way. Because I think this may be the earliest photograph taken of him ever. And I'm going to talk about how we start here. And this is the picture of our Prince Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole. So we look at his face. He looks a little nuha because I think in those days they had to pose for a long time to take these ki'i or these images. And so we appreciate that. And you look at that face, and how many faces like that do we see today? You know, when he was born in 1871, and we celebrate his 150th birthday this year coming up on March 26th. So that's a big milestone year. But we look at that Hawaiian face, that little Keikikane, that little boy, and what he grew up to be. Now, granted, he was somewhat privileged. He was an ALIʻI, so he had some advantages through education and just general upbringing. But how many of those kids do we see today in all of our old ohana, in all of the elementary schools around Hawaii, private and public? That face is still here with us today. So that reminds us of, and this is a phrase that Kamehameha Schools is using as a sort of a motto these days, Hanai ke keiki ola kalahui. We take care of the child well, and he will grow, or they will grow, he or she, I should say, will grow up, and our people and our community at large will thrive. And so March 26, 1871, he was born, Kalanianaʻole was born at Koloa, Kauai. So when you land at Lihue Airport and you hang a left, you're going to pass Puhi, and you're going to head all the way down to Koloa, and then down that tunnel of trees, and I think we've all been there. And there's an area within Koloa called Kukuiʻula. And that is where our ALIʻI was born in 1871, 150 years ago this month. And he was the youngest of 3 children. But before, so again, in low-tech fashion, as I put my glasses on and take them off, I'm going to show you a picture of his mother, and then I'll show you a picture of his father. And this is Kinoiki Kekaulike Elua. So this is Kinoiki Kekaulike II. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But look at her face as well. We still see beautiful faces like that, or like this today, in Hawaiian women all over Hawaii. And mehana o'oe ke kahi o lākou. So, and that's whole mali, but that's Hawaiian style, but I actually mean it. His father is David Kahalepouli Pi'ikoi, and look at his papale. I mean, I don't know if I wear papale from time to time, but I'd like to maybe see Hailama at some point wear a top hat like that and maybe pull a rabbit out of it. But David Kahalepouli Pi'ikoi is the father of our young prince. And one more image before I kind of get into some Moʻokūʻauhau. These are the 3 brothers over here. And I can't see the image because I'm holding it up to you, but they represent the eldest brother, who is David Kawada Nakoa, and the second brother, who is Edward Abno Keli'ahonui, and then of course the ALIʻI who we honor today, Jonah Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole. So I love stories about them. I'm going to tell you before, because I tend to jump back and forth in talking about Hawaiian history, but before I talk about genealogy, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories about those 3 guys. Now, again, they were raised well. They had a lot of advantages. They were educated along the way at Oʻahu College, and that is the older name for Punahou School. But they also were sent away by their uncle, King David Kalakaua, and spent some time, a good amount of time in school in America as well as Europe. But it was in San Mateo, California, that this little moʻolelo is really, I kind of find it really fun. They were raised at the beach in Waikiki. And so they were surfers, they were paddlers, they swam. The ocean was really a part of their world. So while attending college in San Mateo, they were able to get these planks of redwood. And with that redwood, they went to a nearby mill. They told, or they instructed, or asked, and probably paid the owner of the mill to fashion papahe'enalu. And these papahe'enalu made of redwood, but to the specifications of these 3 young boys, David, Jonah, and Edward, and they took their newly milled redwood boards down to San Mateo, down to the beach there in Kaleponi in California. And they were quite a spectacle because no one had ever seen he'enalu before, or surfing, and crowds drew in. They weren't trying to be, to show off or anything. They just wanted to get into the ocean, and it was probably hui loa. Imagine when you jump into the ocean sometimes here in Hawaii, we think it's cold, but imagine that what the temperature would have been like in California. So even there in San Mateo, to this very day, is a monument to the three Pi'ikoi brothers who were who are credited for introducing really surfing to the world. And of course, we all know that later, Duke Pau Kahanamoku really popularized surfing and became a gold medalist in the Olympics. And so getting back to their ohana, so we've seen the picture of their mother, Kinoiki Kekaulike Elua, and their father, David Kahale Poli Pi'ikoi. So, you know, the interesting thing with those three ali'i, and you know, in our world, we are so sort of Kamehameha centric, and so all of the ali'i that we often speak of are descendants of Maui and Hawaii, as Kamehameha was, and as they all were. But this is an opportunity here to see these three young ali'i who descended from the four major islands. Hawaii, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. Well, we focus on Kauai, and we go back to the time of the arrival of Kapena Kuke, and with Captain Cook. That's how Hawaiians refer to through history, Kapena, captain, and Kuke, Hawaiianization for cook. And you know, sometimes people think that Hawaiian history begins in 1778, but it really doesn't. It was just a spot in time where the Western world and the Hawaiian world intersected. And so landing first at Kauai, Captain Cook actually met, and she was the ali'i nui, the ali'i aimoku, or the mo'i wahine, if you will. That's a term that, you know, that's a little bit later, but in any case, her name was Kamakahele. And Kamakahele then in 1778 was the big ruler of that island of Kauai. And she, you know, when she was younger, she was already sort of matched together with a son of the king of Maui. And at that time, his name was Kekaulike. And so this is where Maui and Kauai come together. And so the son of Kekaulike, his name was Kaeo Kulani. And that's a name we don't remember as often as we do his brother, who was Kahekili. And that name is a little bit more because we have Kahekili Highway and so on. But Kaeo Kulani spent most of his life on the island of Kauai. So born on Maui, but went to Kauai. And he and the highest born wahine, an authority on Kauai, Kamakahele, had a son whose name was Kaumuali'i. And Kaumuali'i, if you're from Kauai, and I think we have some people today who are looking in from that island to the west of Oahu, Kaumuali'i Highway that goes around the island. These are things today that remind us of those times and those names and those figures in Hawaiian history. Now, this is where genealogy, sometimes, you know, they don't really contradict, but there's different versions of genealogy as to another of the kane of Kamakahele. And we know him as Kaneoneo. Now, some people give a little bit of a different take on this, but I'll just go ahead with a first version, which was a genealogy that was put together by David Parker. And that's how I initially found out that Mehana and I are related through the Kuali'i family. In any case, so again, let's backtrack a little bit. The son of the king of Maui, Kaeo Kulani, goes to Kauai. He becomes intimate and really a kane of Kamakahele, but she also is with Kaneoneo, and he is from also of Kauai heritage, but he's also from the Peleioholani family from Oahu, and they have several children. Lele Mahoalani is one, but the one I focus on now is Kapua Mohu. So now we have the two children by different fathers of Kamakahele, the queen of Kauai during the time of the arrival of Kapena Kuke to our Pai Aina. And so Kaumuali'i and Kapua Mohu are very close relatives, either brother and sister or uncle and niece or what. but their child is Kinoiki Kekaulike Ekahi. So that, I showed you a picture earlier of the mother of the 3 young princes, and she was E'elua. She was the second one. But the first Kinoiki Kekaulike was really very highborn. And when you are a product, and this is Hawaiian tradition, some people think like, you know, we have these, you know, very close relatives, I mean, very close, actually having children together. But that Wahine marries a high chief, and his name is Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole. And not to be confused with the Prince Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole we speak of today. That comes a little bit later. So Kinoiki Kekaulike the first and Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole together have 3 daughters. 3 daughters. One of them we know well in Hawaiian history, that is Kapiʻolani. The next one is Kapoʻoloku or Poʻomaikelani. And the youngest, I think the youngest of them is Kinoiki Kekaulike Elua. And so she, together with a chief who has lots of Oahu roots as well, David Kahalepoli Pi'ikoi, together have the three princes who's picked the ones who took their redwood planks to the mill in San Mateo, made surfboards and drew quite a crowd. And so, you know, I think that knowing that, and then also going back to the time of Kapena Puke, and you go to Kamakahele's parentage and the high-born Kaumeheiva, and generations above him, Mano Kalani Po. And when we hear songs or we speak about the island chiefs of all the islands, Kauai o Mano and Kauai o Mano Kalani Po is the name that we often hear. That Moʻokūʻauhau goes all the way back to Tahiti, to Moʻikeha, and then before Moʻikeha to Maweke. So very, very old genealogies. So in any case, I'm gonna do one quick mele for you. I have to put on my glasses because although I don't, you know, prefer the look, I can actually see. And oia no ka mea nui, that's the whole point. So this mele is called Puʻuhonua, and what I love about it is that it actually honors the 4-island royal heritage of this ali'i. And Puʻuhonua was initially a home of King Kalakaua that was located in Waikiki, kind of where the Hyatt Regency is today. And it went from, you know, Mauka all the way to Makai to the beach that we actually refer to today as Kūhiō Beach. But the words and the words are a part of a longer text that is a part of the collection of Merikavena Pupui. But these verses were excerpted, and I believe the writer of the music was Auntie Anuhea Brown. So Auntie Anuhea Brown and her husband, Uncle Kihei, were the musical directors of the Prince Kūhiō Hawaiian Civic Club. And that civic club was established in 1960 by Liliuokalani Kavana Nakoa Morris. And so we used to live, when I grew up in my early years in Kahala, right next door to us at the corner of Pueo and Pahoa was Auntie Anuhea and Uncle Kihei. So my mother, or my stepmom, actually married Kekaulike late, marries my dad. We moved to Aina Haina, and they become members of that civic club. In the early 1970s, there were 2 concerts that honored Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole, put on by the Prince Kūhiō Hawaiian Civic Club, and they were titled Pua Leilani, for the home of Prince Kūhiō. And I'll show you a picture a little bit later. We call out to the adornment of the home Pua Leilani. This home that you absolutely adore and love, and you are actually the adornment of that home. Now you wear the adornment of victory, and you've brought all the hearts of our people together. Now 2 verses then go to the 4 islands. Uahaku ia e Mano Kalani, braided by Mano Kalani, Hui ia maila e Kakuhi Heva, and strung as a lei together by Oahu's chief Kakuhi Heva. We now talk about tying feathers for a leihulu into little bunches called uo. Ke uo ia nei la e Maui. You have been also produced by Maui, Poʻoheno oe e Keawe e Hawaii, and you are cherished by the Keawe line from the island of Hawaii. We call out to you and remember your youthful days when you was one handsome Hawaiian. O Kalanianaʻole no he Inoa. So this is Puʻuhonua, and it goes like this. Kalanianaʻole. And so we talk about his home in Waikiki, and I have to, again, in my low-tech presentation today, come up with a picture of Kalanianaʻole, and I absolutely pulled out too many photos, and I'm sorry for showing you the back of my neck at this point, but here's a picture of that home in Waikiki, Puʻuhonua. Sometimes it's spelled as Pua and then Leilani, but for the sake of of Hawaiian orthography as we embrace today, I spell it all as one name, as Hawaiian names are spelled. So David Pi'ikoi, the father of the three young handsome Hawaiian surfing princes, not princesses but princes, he passes away kind of early in their lives, and so he is taken then by Kalakaua, who has since become king. He wins the election in 1874. And I remember one time when as a young member of the Hawaiian Civic Club of Honolulu, which actually is the civic club that was founded by Kalanianaʻole in 1918. But I had mentioned something that Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole was a nephew of both King Kalakaua and their mother, the queen rather, Queen Kapiʻolani. And one of the kupuna at that time came up to me and says, "Oh no, he is only a relative of Queen Kapiʻolani, because her sister Kinoiki Kekaulike Elua was the mother of the three young princes." And I didn't, we don't question kupuna at all, but I did know at that time that the father, who had since passed away, David Kahalepouli Pi'ikoi, and King Kalakaua Lili'uokalanima were first cousins. They were both grandchildren of an Hawaii island ALIʻI, and her name was Kamokuiki. So the three young princes are relatives of both King Kalakaua and Queen Kapiʻolani. So they were actually of Lawehanaiʻia. They were taken as adoptive children by Kalakaua and Kapiʻolani, and in Honolulu, raised. And we have to think of Iolani Palace in those days. This is still in 1874, 1875, in the early years of the reign of King Kalakaua. The palace that we know today as Iolani Palace was not that palace. It was the same location as an earlier palace that was built by Kamehameha III, Kau'i Keauli, many, many years before, on a land section on Oahu in Honolulu called Pohukaina. And so they were raised there, but they were also raised mostly at Puʻuhonua. the original Puʻuhonua. So the picture you saw of that beautiful house in Waikiki was rebuilt by Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole years later. But they were raised at Waikiki Beach. So we talk about him being an athlete and paddling, surfing, and all the ALIʻI were. Even you go forward in history to Princess Kūhiō. She also paddled, she also surfed. And so they were a part of that Waikiki lifestyle. That's why when you go to San Mateo to go to school, you gotta find redwood and mill yourself aboard. And that's what they did. So growing up there, they were privileged, and they were also, they were kolohe. They were rascal kids, like all of our Hawaiian kids are. Lord knows I am, and kind of fun-loving, but they were also well-behaved and well-schooled. So I'm going to show you another picture which I really love. And again, I apologize for the back of my head or my neck, but this is a picture, and take a look at this one. So talking about his athletic sense. And this is a picture of him. He's in the white T-shirt, and grandma them always said we cannot go outdoors like that, but he did. He's on a boat, and he is showing what looks to me like an anai, like a mullet, but he is showing the fish to his aunt Lili'uo Kalani, and this has to be based on her helehelena, on her appearance, not far or not too far off from her passing in 1917. While I'm showing pictures, I see another one here. These are the three brothers, and they're up in Waimea. And what I love about this picture is that they are with John Waipa, who is a Parker, child, and two sisters down there, the Parker girls. But I love how they're wearing Mele Lauli'ili'i, and they're wearing it kikepa style, which you don't see a lot. You see it in hula, but here are these handsome Hawaiian boys wearing the lei kikepa. And so I love that. And the reason I have these pictures at home, because besides being a little bit of a nerd, but I'm a fun nerd for sure, is that they remind me of things that not everybody has to remember perfectly. Maybe that's my job, and I don't mind at all, but I look at them from time to time, and it really makes me think. Hailama mentioned earlier a famous picture, and I have that, and I'm going to show you this one because this is perhaps the most poignant of the images that we have of Prince Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole. And here he is in prison. So the year here, and then take a look at that. And I'm going to mention something that Lili'uo Kalani says over time. And I also, speaking of time, I see that we're rushing right along. It's already 11:42. But in 1895, and that picture was taken in the prison yard, which is not far from where the ʻAha offices are today in Nalama Kukui, a little bit further back in Iwilei, and that's where that picture was taken. And he was arrested. At the same time, Lili'uo Kalani was arrested in 1895 because of the insurrection, or what is known as the Wilcox Revolution. And he took the charge, and he stayed in prison for a year. The president of the republic at that time was Sanford Dole, and he went to Queen Kapi'olani, who was the sister of Kūhiō's mother, and he tells her, because of his status, because of the prince's status, we are okay with letting him be garbed in plain clothes and not the stripes of the prisoner. And she says, oh no, if indeed he was wrong and did commit a crime, he will wear the stripes. And that story goes on in a different direction that we're not going to talk about today. But while he was in prison, 1895 and 1896, he is visited daily by this woman right here. So this becomes eventually the wife of Prince Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole, Elizabeth Kaleiwohi Ka'auai Kahanu. And we know her as Princess Kahanu. For all of those of you who are fortunate to live on the west side in Princess Kahanu Estates, that's who she is. And she eventually is known formally as Princess Kalanianaʻole. And so anyway, after he is released, after 1 year of hard labor down by Liliha Bakery branch of Iwilei, Nimitz Highway area out of prison, and they sort of traveled far away from Hawaii on kind of a self-imposed exile. He is considered, just a dark dark Hawaiian, a dark somebody, and it was not treated well, makes his way to Europe, eventually enlists in the and fights in the war that involved France and Morocco, and then he invests in a diamond mine in Africa. I mean, he was kind of the James Bond of his time. He was daring, he was dashing, he was smart. And I remember, when he eventually gets elected to Congress, because he comes home and he's not Hawaii's first representative in Congress, but in 1902, he is elected and goes to Washington, and 2-year terms as a congressional delegate, and he succeeds 10 times in a row for 2-year terms in Congress in Wakine Kona in Washington, D.C. So 2-year terms times 10 equals how many years? So this is just our little make makika, and that's 20 years. And if you think that this surfing ALIʻI wanted to spend his time in the bitter cold of Wakine Kona for much of his life, 20 years, that was not the case. What he was able to do, and he fought for long and hard to get passage to the Hawaiian Rehabilitation Act. And he did that with the support of several key people in history. One of them was Reverend Akana, who eventually becomes the pastor of Kūhiō Church in 1918. And that's when the Hawaiian Civic Club of Honolulu, or the Hawaiian Civic Club as it was known, was established. And it would not have ever been established were it not for the overall and strong support of Reverend Akana. That was because so many failures for the Hawaiian Rehabilitation Act had been experienced until 2 years later in 1920. 1920, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is written, and the following year in 1921, that Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was passed. So not only do we celebrate the 150th birthday of Prince Kalanianaʻole, but we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Sadly, Kalanianaʻole dies at his home in recess, in congressional recess, back to Honolulu, back to Waikiki, back to his surfing stomping grounds, and he dies in 1922, the year after the passage of that bill. So, and I'm not sure why, but he had a lot going on. And remember that picture of him as a little boy. When we raise little kids well and give them opportunities, they're gonna come up and grow up into the world as really great leaders and great thinkers if we do it right. Not everybody, but maybe some of them, and that's the hana makua. That is the hana hana keiki. That's the job of parents, the job of those who help to raise those children. I'm going to wrap it up now with and this song reminds me, it reminds me of an uncle of mine, Bruce Kepler. Bruce Kepler was a longtime member of the Prince Kūhiō Hawaiian Civic Club, and he sang part of this song as a solo. And of all the people I've ever known, he is the staunch supporter of the memory of Prince Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole. And in fact, before his passing, he gave me a copy of this speech. And the speech was written, by Kūhiō Kalanianaʻole, and it's about a 35, I don't get plenty pages, but this was a speech in 1920 that he gave to Congress that eventually succeeded in establishing the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And he writes to me in his own handwriting, aloha, our inspirational speech by our founder and my hero, Bruce. And so he sings this song that was composed by Albert Nahaleʻa. So Albert Nahaleʻa, you may know his moʻopuna today, who are friends of mine, especially Kihei Nahaleʻa, and also Alapaki Nahaleʻa, who I work with at Kamehameha. But in this song, he takes us to Hilo, to a new Hawaiian Homes development or land areas. And these were 200,000 acres of land Hawaii-wide that were returned after being stolen by the federal government. 1.4 million acres of land ceded. Ceded means given. They weren't given by the federal government, and 200,000 acres returned for the Hawaiian Homes lands, Aina Ho'opulapula. And so this Hawaiian homesteader, Albert Nahaleʻa, who's also affiliated with highly congregational church and a cousin of Auntie Anuhea Brown, who wrote the music for that earlier song about Pua Leilani. So something about those Hilo people, they get them over there. And so this song, he says, Ike ia I Kalani o Keaukaha, seen amidst the beauty of Keaukaha, which is a beautiful place right outside of Hilo, Aina ho'opula pula no nā Hawaii, homestead lands for the Hawaiians. Home ulu vehi vehi I ka ulu hala, homes that are adorned in a backdrop of hala trees, sweet with the fragrance of the hala fruit and also the hinano blossoms of the hala. Henohea I ka maka o ka lehulehu, so attractive in the eyes of all the people. So even today, that Keaukaha area is, to me, one of the most beautiful places in Hawaii. He makana keia mai ke ALIʻI. This is a gift from our ALIʻI. No we nakini pua na Hawaii. For all of you Hawaiians. Malama pono iho ahe vai vai nui. Take care of these lands. Okeola no ia ka Puʻuhonua. This is our lands for us, and it represents our livelihood, our lives. Last verse. Mahalo yaʻoe e ke ALIʻI. Thanks, our thanks to you. O Kalanianaʻole no kou Inoa. Indeed, your name is Kalanianaʻole. E hana like kākou me ke aloha. So Nahale'a says we don't only need to work together as Hawaiians. We have to do it with aloha. And if you don't do it, me ke aloha, it's not going to work. So let's think about that. E kalahui. E hana like kākou me ke aloha I mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. So I can still hear Uncle Bruce Kepler, who was a part Hawaiian attorney in Hawaii, and the representative of Kalanianaʻole, who I learned a lot from, singing this song. Auntie Anuhea Brown at the piano, my mom and dad, Auntie Mele and Uncle Ben Akana, Auntie Irmgard of Aluli, Farden Aluli, and all the High Lama's own auntie, and all of them. And this is a song that I end my presentation with today, Meke Aloha. Ike ia I Kalani o ke aukaha, aina ho'opula pula no nā Hawaii, o me ulu vehi vehi I ka ulu hala, he mohea I ka maka o ka lehu lehu, he makana keia mai ke ALIʻI, no e na kini pua no nā Hawaii, malama pono iho ahe vai vai nui, o ke ola no ia ka Puʻuhonua. Mahalo yaʻoe e ke ALIʻI, o Kalanianaʻole no kou Inoa, e hana like kākou me ke aloha, I mau ke o ka aina I ka pono, I mau ke o ka aina I ka pono. Inoa no Kalanianaʻole. Oia.
Oh, that's getting goosebumps, Manu. Mahalo for that. Mahalo nui. I mean, just the ho'omanaʻo of, Albert Nahale'a, and that ohana from Keaukaha, and then, Prince Kūhiō, and then, that Mele. My mama was with the Hauʻoli Hula Maidens.
Right.
That was one of their Mele.
Choreographed by Auntie Vicky E.E. Rodriguez.
Yes. And Mom just taught me that not too long ago. Taught me this hula. So it was beautiful to listen to. here. Mahalo nui. Hi, love. Have any Manaʻo, any questions?
Mahalo nui iāʻoe and Manu. You are the perfect representative of Kūhiō especially since your uncle is no longer with us. Bruce, who I have family connection to, as he is the godson of my eldest aunt, Margaret Fardin Bruce. And so I guess that is one of our connections, besides my mother being one of your babysitters when you were a little boy. But Manu, I do want to highlight that you are also going to be our featured speaker this year at ALIʻI Sunday, as you were last year at Kawaiahao, even though it's going to be virtual again, I believe. Maybe there are going to be some changes to allow a small congregation, but I'm not sure how we're doing that yet. But mahalo for agreeing again to present not only a presentation to ALIʻI Sunday at Kawaiahao, but also to share a Mele. And I really look forward to your presentations. And I'm thankful that we have this here that is documented. And we did make effort to send to our Hawaiian Civic Club members, and hopefully they're watching and learning even more about our beloved Prince, who established the Hawaiian Civic Club of Honolulu, our mother club.
And let me say this, whenever you or Mehana Okala have a noi, have a request of me, even before I know what it is, the answer is already going to be I. That's how easy it is. And so Mehana, I congratulate you for now being at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, formerly of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, as I was formerly employed. But it doesn't matter where you go, Mehana. To me, wherever you go, you bring sunshine, the warmth of the sun. Mehana Okala. And O'oike Kahi e Hailama, and we've now worked together at Kamehameha schools. And what a wonderful place to work, even though we're doing it virtually. I think we can all of us people, our Lahui and our Kaiaulu in general, can really embrace this vehicle or this vessel called Zoom or Microsoft Teams, because we're able to get together, and I so much appreciate it. And and I'm also thankful to everybody. I don't know how I got all this stuff in my head. I can read, I can skim through things, and dates stick in my head. I don't know how, because it hasn't always been that way. And you can ask Lili Kalaka Mele Hiva, one of my professors in my genealogy class, and I barely got a C because I couldn't remember anything back then. But somehow her works and all of the education I've received along the way has not kept me from being Polohe and Le'alea. And that's also how our own James Bond, Prince Kalanianaʻole, I believe, sort of lived his life. He was amazing, good fun, and awfully smart, and good looking too.
When we were planning this idea of ALIʻI and working with my project manager, Ian Costino, as we were just brainstorming this idea. And I recall the idea of calling it ALIʻI, which others have used, came from Ian's Manaʻo. But in order to get grounded, because we were spinning out of control, thinking how we would bring every single ALIʻI, and that is important. However, we couldn't do it all at one time. We have a saturation issue, right? Our brain can take in so much. So what we could do is commit to continuing this effort. We need to be grounded. So we called on Manu early, I think at the top of January, to say, here's our idea of ALIʻI.
Let's remember also about Ian Costino. His great-grandmother is Vicky Rodriguez, and she was very much a supporter of continuing the legacy of the ALIʻI, especially the Kapa'akea family, or the Kalakaua family in Nalani ʻAha. But so Ian, it's not by chance that he works with you, Hailama, at Kamehameha as a moʻopuna kuakahi of Vicky Rodriguez, who was a teacher of Mehana's mother. So all of these things come together in such an interesting way, and that's what makes us so happy and proud to be Huivi Hawaii.
Absolutely. And I'm thankful to you, because like I was about to say, you helped ground us, because we were spinning out of control, and you centered us, got our focus, and this is where we've landed. And it's only a part of what we've landed, but this is where we are. So it was very important that you're here with us today, not only because of your knowledge, and not only because I do believe you do represent Kūhiō well, but I think also because you helped us in the beginning when we started this idea of ALIʻI. So mahalo to you.
Yeah, and we have, you know, amongst our viewers today, Dr. Kumiʻele Hiva was on, and she was clapping and cheering you on, Manu, you know, amongst our other friends who are on here too, you know, who just love the nerd in you and yeah, so you got much, you know, mahalos here on the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancements Facebook page right now. You might want to skim through those comments after.
Well, also to Kūhiō, who's on our board in the Hawaiian Civic Club of Honolulu and the head of your organization, Kūhiō Lewis, ke aloha nui a ʻoe e ke hoa.
Yeah, I would like to thank him for, you know, allowing and, you know, pitching this project over, you know, to me when I first came on board in January. And I'm kind of out of, you know, out of the water on this one because I'm not a Civic Club member yet, but I get...
Not yet.
Right. And I'm not a homesteader, right? But like, you know, Manu, and of course, Dr. Kumiʻele Hiva on here would always, you know, like to remind us that I'm a graduate of Kumu Manuʻaikohana Kalani and the Center for Hawaiian Studies. So this ike is very much within our wheelhouse to know and understand and love. And yeah, it's making me more and more inspired to join a civic club, start a civic club, do something, you know.
It's running already.
And I think that's important to say before everybody sends you email, come join my club, which you can do, Mehana. But one thing Mehana is actually working through and processing and thinking about, and Manu and I are going to encourage her to do this, is actually start another Hawaiian Civic Club. And she has some important considerations that she's actually brought to my attention. And I really...
to be the Kalani Hawaiian Civic Club.
That would be
I just threw it out there.
Always manifesting now. So you gotta get it all inspired, you know, out there. But yeah, you know, because this lecture series, right, is not only about honoring ALIʻI and honoring that component of our ALIʻI that really, you know, the legacy of OEV leadership today, right? It is, okay, now, once we go through this year, you know, us today, right? The pula, the moʻopuna. How do we civically engage now? How do we now take these, you know, these lessons and these actions that were laid down before us, and then go and carry on that, you know, that torch, that lamaku.
Before we wrap this up, because we're already past 1 o'clock and people all have to go either eat lunch or take a nap. But I want to leave you one more time with this image. You look at this image of Keia Keiki Kane. He's just a little boy, probably was a little nuha because he had to sit in front of a camera, didn't understand why, but he grew up and he changed our world in Hawaii because of being raised well. Hanai ike keiki, ola kalahui. And let's not forget that, because this little boy is in all of our communities. He's everywhere, and little girls as well. So if we remember this, and he didn't know what his life was going to be like, what his experiences were going to be like, but he worked it hard with aloha. And oia no o ke aloha ka mea nui.
Oh yeah. And on that note, everyone, mahalo nui no ko ako ko mai I ke ia awake nei no ko ho'olohe mai ke ia nerd nei ke ia ku'uhoa no me ku'upaka lama and yeah, ahui ho kako, but come back next week. Week. Same day, we'll have Dr. Kalani Akana featured next week, and then the week after that, Dr. Davianna McGregor. Yeah, so ho'i mai no kako, and ahui ho malama pono.
Okay, mahalo.